Welcome to the Soccer Coaching Podcast, where we will discuss all things that impact soccer coaching across all levels and ages. Please listen, enjoy, and share your thoughts on the discussions at the Soccer Coaching Podcast.
Hello and welcome to this edition of the Soccer Coaching Podcast.
And I'm your other host, Mark.
We're delighted to say for what will be our 10th episode, we've managed to get on a very big guest and someone that I've kind of followed and listened to for at least a couple of years now. It's the first time we've spoken directly, but I feel like I know him inside out. I've listened to him more than listened to my wife over the last year or so, that's for sure. So we've got Stuart Armstrong from the Talent Equat, which I'm sure you would be familiar with already, but if you're not, we're going to find out a lot more about what Stu does and the podcast itself. But I'm genuinely very excited and very grateful, Stu, that you made yourself available to us today. So thank you very much.
Oh, I'm more than happy to come on.
Well, I feel like I've turned the tables a bit here, Stu, because obviously we listen to you getting some great guests on your podcast and asking some really probing questions around what they do and why they do it. And I know that that's helped me out loads with how I approach my coaching philosophy, with the sessions, open my eyes up to other people to listen to. So I feel like we're turning the tables now on you, and it's a chance for you to tell us a bit about, you know, what you've done and why you've done it and stuff, if that's all right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, as regular listeners to the podcast will know, I'm never like purely just an interviewer. I'm always prepared to, you know, venture forth with the odd rant or two from time to time. So, hey, only too happy to have the tables turned.
Well, that was the first podcast I listened to, Stuart. It's a couple of years back, I'm sure now. And it was one you were walking down the street because I could hear traffic in the background. And it was I think your follow-up to your War on Drills one. And listening to it, it was just like, you know, you were saying all the things that I kind of had in my head and I kind of felt was right, but I hadn't heard anyone say it before. And it kind of got me looking at things differently. So, yes, I know you're happy voicing your views on stuff, and that's what we want. And for Mark and I'm sure, you know, it'll be a good insight for everything. But I wondered, like, genuinely, because it's always your guests we hear more about than anything else. It would be great to know just firstly your background first, Stu, and what you've been up to up until you got to doing the podcast. All right.
Yeah. Wow. So I started out, I guess. I mean, I wanted to, when I was a kid at school, I wanted to be a graphic designer. I used to love drawing, and I was into comic art and all that sort of stuff. And then I did A levels and I did A level art and I was all that sort of stuff. And then the art teacher caught me for the 16th time out on the hockey pitch when I should have been in his art lesson. And he said, "You should have a career in sports, son." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Turned out to be pretty good career advice.
I'll do that.
So I sort of changed tack and went and did a sports degree. And then as doing my sports degree, I discovered my love of coaching. That's kind of where I first started getting involved. I was born with a bit of a disability. And it kind of, I've always played like able-bodied sport, played some junior international stuff. And I kind of, having disability, I meant I was a bit slower than everybody else. So I started to become quite sort of like aware of my surroundings, and I was pretty tuned into sort of the tactical side of things to make up for my limitations. So that started me on this journey to coaching because I was looking at the game really tactically. And then from then I just progressed through and started doing various different teams. So I've always sort of played and coached. Then I had a stint as just a coach, and then I've come back to playing. And then through this whole journey of like learning to be a coach and becoming the best coach I could try and become, really, I did my level 3 qualification. And like everybody, I was going to coach England, wasn't I? So I was waiting to do my level 4. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do level 4, I need to like log my journey. I need to sort of, you know, have some reflections. And so I thought, well, what better way to do that than to actually do it? You know, blogging had just started to come out, and I started a blogger site, just recording some of the learnings that I was having and just doing some bits and pieces and all that sort of stuff. And then lo and behold, people started to read it, and I got a bit of a following. And I've always loved podcasts. I've had various jobs in sports industry, working in talent development and coaching. I've worked in golf. I've worked in rugby. I've worked for a range of. I've worked as a coach developer for England hockey and all those sorts of things. And I spend a lot of time driving, and so podcasts are my savior. And I've always loved podcasts. And I thought I want to do one. And I tried a couple of times, but it was pretty technically demanding, and time and everything else got in the way. And then in the end, I just thought, right, I've just got to crack this. So I decided to give it a go. And I think you probably heard probably episode 2 or 3. And I feel a bit sorry for you, actually. So my apologies, because you've been on the journey in sound engineering that I've been on through this whole process. And that's really where it started from. And it's a bit of I guess it's like a labor of love, I guess. It's a hobby, it's a passion. But the whole reason for doing it, and the reason I do the blog and the website, is to help people, I guess, navigate some of the challenges that I had to go through, all these difficult challenges, and did some really poor things in the early days, and really, look back now and think, oh my God, what the hell was I doing? So I hope just some other people don't have to go through that challenge quite so much, because there's more information now readily available. And now coaching podcasts are coming thick and fast, and so the community is amazing. So it's great to be able to talk to you guys.
Oh, super stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. I've kind of recognised not only the knowledge from what you put on the episodes that you've done, but also the systematic increase and improvement in the quality of the audio and the delivery and stuff. So obviously, it's a well-earned labour of love.
Although there appears to be more podcasts from the side of the motorway than in recent times than at the beginning.
Yeah, I've been pretty busy at work, and so I've been trying to squeeze them in. And sometimes it's been like, oh God, I'll have to pull over. And actually, I've done a couple while I've been driving, and thought I really can't concentrate properly. This is a health and safety hazard.
Yeah.
So I better pull into a services. So yeah, you get quite a few from the likes of South Mims or places like that.
Yeah. Oh, it keeps it real.
And Stuart, just a question, I guess. So you kind of gone on this this kind of journey you've spoken about, and you've had a lot of guests on, and do you still feel like you're learning as you're going through now? I guess a lot of coaches talk about continuing learns, pick up new bits. Do you still feel like you're doing that, even though you've got all this kind of experience and you've done all these kind of blogs and podcasts? Do you still feel like you're learning from the guests that you're having on?
Well, I guess if I'm totally selfish about this, one of the things that I really get out of doing the podcast, and I suppose one of the other reasons to do so, was it was an opportunity. It's like having great CPD, isn't it? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I mean, I did qualifications. I've been on various CPD courses. I've read a lot. I've studied. I've watched videos. I've done all sorts of bits and pieces. But if I'm honest, I think the best coach development I've ever had has always been from other coaches. And one of the things that I've always missed is the opportunity to have a conversation with other coaches, like-minded people, and actually throw some ideas around. So to be honest, the podcast actually is one of the greatest sources of CPD I've ever had, because I get to have great conversations with other coaches and we get to explore ideas. And that's one of the reasons why when I set it up, I was very keen to not have a script too much and not to have too many set questions, because I wanted the conversation just to be natural and flowing, and let's see where it ends up. And I mean, apart from anything else, I haven't got time to actually set a script up. So to be honest, I just it just suited me to do it that way. But it seems that people kind of, I think maybe certainly from what the feedback I get on the podcast is that they like the fact that it is a fairly free-flowing exploration of in conversation, and we can sort of meander off into all sorts of different directions, and boy do we meander.
Yeah.
Well, everything you talk about, there's always a different path to go down, isn't it? That's the thing with coaching, that you can just go off anywhere with it, and that's the beauty of it, I guess. I wonder from you then, from when you first got the idea of doing the podcast, you obviously had your initial thoughts back then, your own experiences. Have they changed a lot since you started doing the podcast and talking to your guests? Or has your mind kind of been the same and it's reinforced what you kind of already thought was going to be good practice, or kind of had like a bit of a revolution in your way of thinking because of some of the experiences you've gone through with the podcast?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, actually. I think, I probably, when I first set out, I think I had an idea that I wanted to I knew I'd met lots of people in my time working in coach development, talent development, and I knew there was a lot of people with some great stories to tell. And I was very fortunate to have met them. And many of them had been pretty influential on my own coaching career and my career in sport generally. And I felt like I want to give these people a voice. So of course, you've had people on there like Mark Bennett, and you've had people on, people like Jamie Edwards more recently, and Andrew Gillett's been on, and Marco Sullivan, and these are people that I'd got to know, and all those sorts of things, and Rick Shuttleworth. And I thought, I want to let other people hear what these people have got to say, because they've been big influences on me. So that was probably the primary objective. And the agenda, I suppose, was to share some of their messages, which was very much around the idea of, what is a player-centered experience for participants, and, how can we do things better, and what's the different ways that we might be able to do things better. So that was the starting point, I suppose. And I guess I'd written a few blogs around the idea of the kind of, let's get rid of drills and let's do all these sorts of things. And they'd been pretty controversial and stoked up some interesting debates. So I thought, well, that's a good starting point, isn't it? And then let's see where we go from there. So there wasn't anything out there, as far as I could see, that was promoting the, more of that kind of the ecological model that I sort of espouse, and the, game sense and all those sorts of different ideas. So I felt like, that was a good place as well to explore within. And I thought there's going to be some interesting people, and it might be a way of getting them to come and have a conversation with me, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to have a conversation with them, which is certainly how it's transpired. But then, as I've got into it a bit more, I've sort of wrestled with the idea, because I've had quite a lot of, as you know, there's quite a lot of debate in the coaching space. It feels like it's a little bit polarized almost. And I've had a lot of requests from various people to sort of put the other side of the argument across, if you like. And so I've been wrestling with the idea as to whether I should allow it to just carry on being a bit of an echo chamber where I get to have conversations with like-minded individuals, because I still think there's plenty to be discussed in that space. Or I have a more nuanced discussion with people who can put the other argument across. Now, you may have seen, certainly on Twitter, I've been inviting people to come and talk to me, but I'm having a hard time getting them to come on. So for the time being, it's going to remain an echo chamber, because to be honest, I still feel like there is plenty to be discussed in that space.
Yeah. Totally understand. Yeah, you did right. I think Mark and I said the same thing, don't we? The idea of doing the Soccer Coaching podcast wasn't just to kind of reinforce our own beliefs from day one. It was to say, look, hey, we think this way. What do you think? Is it, what's worked for you? What hasn't worked? And share some of those ideas and experiences. And I guess, Stuart, listen to your podcasts. What comes up more frequently as the episodes go on is that what if thing, isn't it? Actually, you know what? There probably isn't one rule for everybody. There's probably a whole lot of different ways out there in which you can tackle problems in different ways. It depends on your own coaching style, depends on the group you've got, where they're at, your resources. And that may be the reason you can't get a decisive yes or no, and it becomes quite polarized, is because everyone's experiences are a bit different. And therefore, by doing the things that you're doing for the talent equation, at least you're putting up different ways of looking at things, which hopefully increases our ability to have different sets of tools to deal with the groups that we're working with, regardless of the sport. It would be fair to say that's part of this. It's just putting out ideas. Yeah,
I think it's probably fair to say that I'm definitely on one side of the fence. But what I like to think is that I'm giving people a lot of scope while still being on one side of the fence in terms of approaches. So I've definitely, pretty unapologetically said, I'm not going to go back to the sorts of approaches that I used to do, because I've had 20 years of experience of that. And to be honest, I could pretty much go back to that tomorrow and I'd be pretty good at it. But I'm exploring something else at the moment, and I'm kind of taking people on that journey with me. I'm a learner like everybody else. We're all learning, going back to what we were talking about earlier on. And I'm really enjoying exploring not only practically what I'm working on, but also meeting people like yourselves and others who are exploring the same things. And so I'm quite, I want to hear from them and share those different thoughts and ideas, and show actually the breadth of approaches that are available to people, even while still exploring within a more constraints-led approach, let's say.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
and I think like even with like-minded people, like Scott and I are very much on the same page in terms of our kind of philosophy and our approach to coach. But even within that, there's so many. There's certain things that perhaps we're a little bit we don't agree 100% on. Right, we have different views on it. then we often kind of debate things and go over things. And Scott tries to influence me significantly to move on to his side of the fence. But I think there's just there's just so much in the kind of coaching side of things where you can be on the same kind of page and have the same ideas, same philosophy, but actually you do things slightly differently because your belief is that it should be done this way. You don't kind of necessarily rule out what someone else likes or believe, but you kind of have your certain views on how you want it done.
Sure. I wonder if it would be worth, I mean, I've got no doubt that most of our listeners would have listened to your podcast before they've listened to any of our stuff. But just in case, and maybe just clarification anyway, would you be comfortable just explaining kind of your general approach to coaching then? I mean, I know the ecological approach and, maybe more game sense and player centered, but if you were to summarize that in, a few minutes worth of paragraphs, how would you articulate that to someone that doesn't really know what that looks like and maybe is doing the same things Mark and I were doing 5 years ago, where we had our boys lined up in queues and, much about the coach runs the show and you listen to what we got to do and it's very drill based. How do you have a different approach to that and what would it look like in practice for you?
Yeah, that's a fair question actually, and probably one I don't explore enough around. So I spend a lot of my time. So I suppose if you were to ask me kind of like what my kind of focus point would be, the starting point is that I don't know anything about the human beings in front of me, but what I can do, so I don't know how they best learn. I don't know what they're capable of doing. I don't know the way. But what I do know is I know there's a game, and that game has certain rules. And within those rules, there are various things that are required for you to do in order to be able to be successful at that game. So I'm going to take an individual and all of the varying capabilities that they have, and that's a range in our both of our sports. I'm field hockey, you guys are football, and in both cases there is a group of individuals who are all different, and they've all got different approaches and different. So they've all got to be taken care of. That's one of our challenges, right? There's lots of them, and the other challenge is that we've got to make sure that there's a game for them to play, and that game requires them to do certain things in order to be able to. And every game, both of our games are the same. They're both invasion games. They both require players to perform certain game interactions or game actions in order to be successful. And then there's also the task at hand, right? So that's how I kind of conceptualize of the experience that I'm going to create. So I'm going to design an environment that requires them to play this game and to perform some of the actions that are going to be required at this game. I'm going to design some tasks for them, some problems for them to solve. And I'm going to try and design that problem for them to solve as close as possible to within their capabilities, as close as possible, maybe just beyond their capabilities. That's kind of how I'm going to design their environment. So you've got the athlete, task, environment. That's where we're going to, the constraints-led triangle. And that's how I'm going to approach it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow those individuals to explore through the environment that I've created what possibilities are there for them in terms of the particular movement patterns or techniques or whatever it is that they might be required in order to solve the problem that's presented to them. So the game, for example, I mean, in any game, football, for example, it involves you either, let's just talk about it in an offensive context. You're going to have to either carry the ball or you're going to have to pass it, right? So I might choose one of those or both of those, but let's just say I'm choosing that you have to carry the ball. So I'll design a task or a game that requires them to carry the ball a lot in certain circumstances. Now, that might involve a lot of numbers. It might involve small numbers or whatever it is, but that's what I'll do. And I might design the game in such a way that they can only carry the ball in a certain way. So, for example, in a football context, they can only carry the ball, say, using one foot or the other. Or I'll encourage them that they can use one foot or the other using points or whatever it might be. And then they'll go and play that game, and then they'll explore lots and lots of different ways of them to be able to perform that particular movement, whatever it might be. That's not me saying that the movement must be performed this way, because they're all different, they're all individuals, And that's them saying, and also the movement that they perform has to be in relation to what the game's asking them to do, what they're capable of, and what the task requires. So actually, the idea that I could give them an actual perfect way of doing so is kind of a little bit nonsensical in my mind, because it's going to change depending on who they're up against, what the task is, where the balls come from, how it's got to be moved, what the other dimensions of the game require them to do. And it's never going to be the same twice. So my job is to be an environment creator, an environment architect that facilitates a learning experience, but allows players opportunities for discovery and exploration. Because in my mind, I don't know about you guys, but when I was a kid, I was one of those kids that was down a backwoods, right? I used to come home at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock at night when my mum called me in for my dinner, and I'm covered in cuts and grazes and bruises and all that jazz, right? But I've had the best time of my life exploring those backwoods, or with my mates in the backfield creating a game of cricket with a piece of wood and a tennis ball and designing a game that was as hard as possible because it was much more fun if it was hard. They were the best moments of my life. And I definitely don't want to be the kind of person that robs kids of that. So I want to try and make my environment as much like that childhood experience as possible, whilst also devising a little bit of additional extra that might just make it a bit more meaningful from a learning perspective, because I know there are a few game problems that they might want to explore a bit more than something else. And that's kind of my entire approach. It wasn't a nutshell, it was like a 5-minute diatribe, but there you go.
It was a superb summary, and I think Mark and I are very thinking how we approach things. What I've done, Stu, is honestly pretty much with the back of you and others as well. I've listened to Mark Bennett and a few others that are from the back of your podcast that I've listened to. When I'm thinking planning, my first thought is, right, I mean, I know my players now, so that's a big advantage. I've had them for 18 months, 2 years, so I know the players. And I think we've got a good, positive learning environment. You know, that's important. So we've got that. So it's about the session itself. And I start with a game. And I think, okay, what are we working on for this week or the next block of what we're focusing on? When I start with a game and try and back from that, it's not always very easy to work backwards from the game and then scale it down to something that you can focus on. But I'm constantly thinking about that. And what you said there about it has more relevance, because then what I get is the transference in the matches, and what you see the players be able to do actually in real competitive games is reproduce that stuff. Or if they can't, I know they can't because they didn't do it at the training, so I know they're not quite ready for that yet, which is fine. But like it's got a much more higher percentage chance of transferring into the matches, because what we've done in training is a lot closer aligned than maybe what I had done like 3 or 4 years ago, where it looked lovely in isolation and look really good on the training ground. They're all neat lines and all the players doing all the right things and looks very polished, but then it can't play out in names. And I think, if I was trying to sell the philosophy or the concept, it's just on transference alone. If you want the players to be able to do the things that they need to do in games themselves, then you've got to keep it as close to the game as you possibly can, without just throwing the ball in there.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And I think you're spot on in the fact that it's more fun, right, for the players or for the boys or for the girls who are there. It's a lot more fun, a games-based approach. And ultimately what you're trying to do is to get those players to come to develop and get better, but you want them to keep their interest. You want them to come back next week. You want them to come back next season. You still want them playing in 5 years' time. And I think a games-based approach just enables that. As well as the development side, it's the fun as well. It's the enjoyment of the session for the players. I do think that it takes a more work from a coaching in terms of the planning and the preparation, and also in terms of the reflection, looking back, to create a real kind of player-centered games-based approach. Definitely more work there, but the longer-term benefits are just huge.
Yeah. What do you think, Stu? Is that fair? Would you say that? Because I think the theory is that in a games-based approach, because you basically set up a game and throw a ball in there, and that's not what we're saying. Would you say from your experiences that actually trying to take the approach that you believe in, and I think we echo, can be tougher in many ways than doing a more traditional approach?
Oh, without doubt. And I've said before that, well, yes and no. Okay, so there's a couple of ways of looking at that. So without doubt, in the sense that I think it does require us as coaches to have much more creativity and imagination. So we are challenged, aren't we, not to just be going, all right, I'm going to follow the instructions on the box of the Lego so I can create the perfect thing. What we're doing is we're saying, oh, I'm going to create something from scratch. Yes, that requires us to think it through a little bit more. It requires us to be able to, kind of design things. And actually, one of the other challenges, and I don't know if you guys have found this, quite often you have to get used to adjusting things on the fly. It's very rare that you do a game form from scratch that works straight out there. You think, no, I've got to tweak, I've got to amend, I've got to tweak, and I've got to amend. So I think for me, you've got to get used to those two things first and foremost, haven't you? You've got to get used to, firstly, putting a bit more thought into your practice design, and secondly, being prepared to adapt and adjust on the go, which I think a lot of people find difficult because they kind of prefer to have a preconceived idea of what was going to happen and to kind of follow that through to the letter. And I get that. I understand that.
Control, haven't you? A little bit of control. It gets that take away from you, doesn't it, as the coach, because you've not got control of every aspect that's going on. There's more variables in there.
Yeah, and it feels a little bit chaotic, doesn't it? Because you're kind of reacting and you're engaging and all that. And I have to say, one of the things that I do sometimes find difficult is coming away from sessions thinking, was that as good as it could have been? I don't 100% know. I went a bit off on a tangent and maybe I shouldn't have, maybe I should have come back. And that's one of the things that I want more opportunity to be able to speak to somebody after a session and go, what do you reckon? And be able to sort of do that kind of peer support. I'm working on my own a lot. I do have sometimes people working with me, but I'd love to have somebody who could really challenge my process. I mean, I'm certain that if you guys came to watch one of my sessions, you'd go, why'd you do that? And couldn't it be better if you did that? And I'd go, oh yeah, that would have been loads better. Because in the moment, you can't always you can't always sort of pinpoint the thing that you need. And it's only when you step back, you think, yes, that would have been so much better. So just coming back to the point there.
I think.
So just going back to that point there about, is it harder? Yes. However, I think that's partly because of our conditioning. So as a group of coaches, I mean, I came into the game with a lot of ideas about how the game should be played, right? And we all probably come into coaching with some sense of what people need to do in order to play. We go and do our badges and we learn about techniques and we study techniques and we think, this is what we need to do. And so as a result, you have to almost recondition yourself to kind of stop thinking that way. Stop thinking about the technical solutions. Allow the technical solutions to emerge. Design the environments to enable individuals to explore different technical solutions. And step in with a technical support later, a little bit later down the track when the individual maybe has exhausted the options, right? And then they need the extra support. So we're just coming at it at a later stage. Not to say we don't do it, we're just coming at it later. Now, the problem for me is that because I've been thinking in that way, it's quite hard to recondition your mind. Whereas I actually find that coaches who've been working in this way from the beginning, they're like, well, why would you do it any different way? And I'm really jealous of those people because they're not they're not encumbered by the idea that you have to have a lot of technical knowledge. Now, having said that, I do think you still need game knowledge and you still need technical knowledge because you can't design the games really well without that. But that's not as important at the beginning as people think it is. So we've all been on coaching courses where they basically tell you about this is the technique. You have to learn this technique, learn that technique and all that sort of stuff. I actually think we've got to flip it round, right? Let's learn the technical stuff later down the track. Let's actually let the kids learn the technical stuff later down the track. Let's let them get busy learning how to play our game first, then start to solve the problems technically for them a bit later down the track when they can't quite solve them for themselves.
I think that's again, maybe one of the areas Mark and I are not quite fully joined on is when you bring that technical stuff into it and how much of that you spend time working with the players on the isolated technical practice. And so I fully agree with you. I think, we work with youngsters. We pick them up at under 6s, under 7s. So these are very much the beginning of their footballing journeys. They're little people, very little. But what I think is, from seeing the players, is that first year or two, our job is just to grow their enthusiasm to play the game, right? Enjoy it, enjoy competing, build up that resilience, build up the wanting to learn and get better. And then I kind of think when they get to maybe, under 8s, under 9s, under 10s, you start refining some of that technical stuff because they understand it then. They're almost ready to learn that finer detail. we do see, and I'm not criticising these, but we go and watch a lot of the academies as well at various levels, but some of the top academies in the countries, and they'll be taking 6s and 7s and 8s, and they'll spend the first hour or so of a session doing purely technical work, with these young lads. And now, don't get me wrong, I get level where their passion for the game is very strong, and they've got other factors there that keep them focused and stuff. But for me, it feels like it's a bit early, and actually just getting and playing and enjoying the game is the priority for those first few years, and then refining it. When you talk about the ages, is that the kind of years you mean? Have I misinterpreted that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we often talk, don't we? I mean, just talking about kind of like our football team, and I've often heard pundits and commentators talk about how we're just not technical enough. We're not technically good enough. We're not as technically adept as the Spanish. Well, if you watch our players, right, performing technical movements, they can perform them as well as anybody else. They actually physically can. They actually can do that. What they can't do is perform those technical movements when it really matters, and also at the right time. And why is that? Well, my hypothesis that I guess I'm testing is they haven't learned that technical movement in the environment, or in as close to that kind of an environment as they're likely to perform it in. So, for example, you talk about someone like, say, Iniesta or Xavi, and their vision and their ability to find space and make great through balls and all those sorts of play. Well, you don't learn to make through balls by practicing over and over again a repetitive passing action of a through ball against no opposition. What you do is you have lots and lots of exposure to an environment which invites you to look for opportunities to play through balls. And if you can play those through balls, you begin to attune to the moments in the game when that's a good thing. Plus, by the way, in order to play that through ball, you've got to have found enough space by getting away from a defender in order to buy yourself the time to be able to see the pass and make the pass, which in itself is a skill. And those two pieces of movement, or those pieces of action, have to be combined together. You can't do them separately. So we're going to do a bit of movement away from the player here and control, right? And then we're going to do over there, we're going to do some through ball practice, but we're never going to join the two things together. Well, surprise, surprise, the skill breaks down under pressure. It's not been designed in a way that is representative of the competitive environment. So that's my, I guess, central philosophy is we've got to be more skillful in our practice design in order to facilitate the kind of experiences that kids are likely to get. That's where skill emerges, as opposed to this other way of doing it. It's like a mechanistic approach, right? We break it down into its component parts. I'm going to give you a series of movements. We call them techniques. And then we're going to then place those technical movement patterns into some sort of contextual environment, and we're going to make them fit together and going to work. Honestly, if people can show me that works, genuinely can show me that works, and it will withstand pressure at the highest level, I'll back off and we can go and have a different conversation, and I'll come back full circle and we'll start going down that route. I've just found that in my experience, that's not what happens. And so I've decided that the best thing for my players in terms of skill development is to create those kinds of environments. And do you know what the brilliant byproduct of that is? It's way more fun for them. So it's like the winner. It's like a winner, isn't it?
Yeah. I think what we get with you're absolutely right. I think what we're getting to here is that it really comes down to like decision making, right? For what you're creating in your environment with this games based approach is that you're creating they're making decisions all of the time. They're making decisions how they find space to solve problems. Yeah, how do I find space? And once I receive that ball, how do I receive it in the best way that's going to allow me to either dribble forward if I've got space to run into, or if I want a ball, how can I play that through ball? When am I going to play that through ball? So you're just creating lots of decision making opportunities within the game, which again transfers to the real game when they get older, or when they're playing at the weekends and things like that. To me it just comes down to decision making is just the critical part of the session.
And also, you're allowing the opportunity to develop their own way of solving that problem. So not telling them, here's the answer to this problem first, go and practice the answer. Right, here's the problem, find your way of solving it. I do worry again that we teach all these players these kind of set of moves, and they're great, and they're fantastic moves, and some players are great at pulling them off and stuff. But I wonder what they'd do if they weren't shown any moves at all and just asked to create their own moves. Who's going to create the next Cruyff turn or the next Ronaldo chop or something? If we keep just teaching them these moves themselves, where's their creativity and thinking of their own moves? We want to see the next player's own moves, and their way of threading that through ball, beating that player, might be something that I can't teach them that, but they'll find their own solutions that probably give them a chance to do it.
So, Stu, can I just ask you a quick question? Just taking you back to you're talking about this kind of games-based approach. I think you touched on interventions very quickly, and you were mentioning that perhaps you intervene a little bit later in the session. Maybe you wouldn't do it so early. I think one of my kind of thoughts is that when I do my interventions, I jump quite early if I see something that's not right, even from a technical standpoint, or perhaps the decision that they're made, I would ask them why they made that decision. I would maybe do that quite early on in the session if I see it. I think it can be a bit of an imbalance whether you leave it and you follow up. In general, what's your kind of approach in that situation?
So I have to say this is a bit of a work on for me. I'll be totally honest. So I'm having to. So a bit like you guys, I suppose, right? So if I see somebody who is struggling with a particular movement, or I see somebody who is, for example, they make a similar mistake over and over again. When I say mistake, sorry, they make an action that isn't helpful to them. I don't like the language of mistake. It's not quite the right thing, but they're making an action that isn't necessarily that helpful. It's not helping their team, but they don't seem to be picking up on the fact that it might not be helping them solve the problem. Then I find it really difficult, because I think I'm pre-programmed as a coach to help, and I have the means at my disposal to help. So I have to help. And it feels, if I don't help, it feels like walking past a traffic accident and just walking on by. It's like, it feels so unnatural to not oh, I can help that poor individual. Let me help them with the problem that they don't know that they've got yet, but I'm going to help them anyway. And the problem I find is that I'm kind of I'm doing it the wrong way around, right? So going back to the point we made a minute ago, where we were talking about giving answers, right? So we're often giving answers or solutions to questions that the kids haven't been asked yet. So if you think about, they haven't got any reason to think that matters to them, so they haven't connected it with the problem yet, right? So I want to work it around. Here's a problem, right? Let's work out how we can solve this problem. And then when they solve it, that's powerful learning right there. It's really important on the meaning. So flipping it back to our environment that we've created here, what I have to stop myself from doing is stepping in there, right? Because basically what I've done is, it means if the player hasn't yet responded in a way that might be more helpful to them or their team, it's not because it's not because they don't have the solution yet, not necessarily. It's probably because I haven't designed the practice form in a way that as they've been able to pick up the cues required for them to act in this way. So then, instead of stepping in and saying, what if you did this, what if you did this, I might just go, right, now, your team now, you get a bonus point every time you perform this action. So now the player is attracted to this particular opportunity. Or I might pose a question, which might be, right, you as a group here, what do you think? What kind of actions might help you beat this player? Now, have you noticed what they're doing? Draw their attention to the actions. That's another option available. So one option is create a game rule. The other option is draw their attention to what the opponents are doing, so that they're now picking up on the cues, because at this point they hadn't picked up on the cues. They're just playing in their own little world, right? Or the third option, this is not an exhaustive list, I've probably lots of others I haven't explored yet, but the third one I would do is go, right, you over here, I'm going to go and tell them, team you're playing against, I'm going to tell them a specific thing to do to counteract you. I want you guys to work out what that is. So I give the constraint to the opponents to bring about the change of behavior in the group that I want to do the action. So let's say I've got this player and they're carrying the ball into contact all the time and not realizing they're doing so or don't seem to care. If I then give 5 bonus points every single time their opponents make an effective tackle, watch how the behavior of the team in possession changes. And I've done this. So by changing the task, you can change the attunement to the information. So you're just strengthening the information that if they get me, they're getting 5 points. We can't let them get the ball. And all of a sudden, they either pass or they dribble to space or they do other things. And so what I try and do now is explore various different practice forms until eventually I've exhausted them. Now, if at that point, right, I've thrown 3 or 4 different practice forms and it's not happening, then I'm going to step in and then we'll have a conversation about different forms of action.
Well, that's fascinating. Stuart, we did a podcast episode about interventions the other week, and I'm hands up. I mean, we spoke about interventions, but at not one point did we discuss the option of actually adjusting the task itself.
Yeah,
and it's
that's right.
Again, it shows you where we are in our coaching journeys and how far we've got to learn more still, because it's so true. Actually, you want to, even you can resist temptation in going to give them the solution, which is a tough thing to resist at times. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily help them. To give them more time is not always the answer. And actually thinking, what can we do about adjusting the task itself? Either, I guess, individual or collectively, that is an intervention in its own right, isn't it? Just a different type of intervention, which we didn't mention at all, did we?
Yeah.
You're the head of interventions.
Yeah, I'll take the full blame. It's almost like a progression a little bit as well, right? It's like a progression and intervention kind of all rolled into one. It's definitely something that I haven't used a great deal.
It's your point about the planning and the ability to maybe dial up or dial down the session to how you think is going to work best for the game or the practice you put on, while still maintaining its integrity to stay close to the game and the task itself. Right? I guess that's it. I think you mentioned 2 or 3 times it's that word chaos. Do you think that as coach worry too much about chaos, and is it an underused element of coaching, generally speaking?
Yeah, definitely.
Games are chaotic, right?
Yeah, and we as coaches like things to be neat and tidy and ordered. We're kind of taught that, aren't we? Because it's safer. We also equate order with organisation, and we prize organisation in coaching, and it's what's expected. Parents are watching. They expect organisation and order. They don't expect kids messing about, right? And I'm not saying I have kids messing about necessarily, right? I like to think that if kids are messing about, again, I haven't got the practice form right, because I want them to be so engrossed in the practice form that I don't get any behaviour problems. And I have to say, since I've been working in this way, I have found that I'd get very, very little in terms of behavioural challenge. If ever I get behavioural challenge, it's usually because I've chosen a practice form that has disengaged them, and it tells me it's a signal to me. I've got to change this because they're not connected to it. And it surprises me sometimes the things they don't get connected to. I had a boy the other day. I was like, we played a Fortnite game? It's the end of season stuff, right? Playing a bit of Fortnite festival. Didn't like it. Oh, why didn't you like it? Well, it wasn't real enough for me. Oh, okay, fair enough. Yeah, interesting feedback. But anyway, what I was going to say, 99% of them liked it, so I'll probably go with the 99% actually. But in reality, good feedback.
That, yeah.
But the point, it's a really good point about chaos, because, so it's about having enough chaos. Yeah, it can't be completely disordered, right? Because even kids, if you let them play in the back garden, will create order. Because the game, in pure chaos, like no rules, I can pick the ball up, like they did that's how rugby was invented, apparently. In pure chaos, it's not much of a game, right? So you do have to create some structure and order. And kids are brilliant at this. They make it fair. But I know when I was a kid, I used to You never want, like playing cricket, you never want somebody to be in bat for too long, do you? It's boring, right? So you make it hard, and one bounce and all these different rules that you design to create to make it so that people aren't in bat for too long. And so you create all these little rules to create a bit of order, because otherwise the game isn't that much fun. And I just see it as a similar thing. But you've got to have enough chaos, because if it's too stable and it's too ordered and structured, well, it's boring, isn't it? You kind of know what's going to happen. So I think the word chaos is a little bit overused, and people just assume that means, right, there you go, jumpers for goalposts, throw the balls in, off you go, whatever numbers you want, off, play. That's not what this is about. It's not pure chaos, but it's about using the concept of chaos as a form of variability. I've used chaos there. I prefer the phrase variability a little bit, because you want it to be variable enough that it's still real and it's still challenging, but not so variable that it's like, oh my God, I can't take in all this information. And then actually none of the learning takes place. And that's my problem with some aspects of what you might call game-based concepts. Is that the assumption is just play. And I'm not in that place. I'm definitely a little bit back from that, because I'm in designer games. Oh yeah, definitely love designer games. I'm not just in let the kids play and completely free play world. Although I do understand there's some real value in free play and backyard games, and I do like them and I do use them. It's just not something I'm always going to be using, because I do think that's kind of a bit of an abdication of our responsibilities as coaches.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. There's definitely time and place for free play. We use it in our training sessions. We've spoken about it quite a lot on our podcast. We generally use it when the kids first arrive.
Survival activity, because they're young. We have mini pitch set up, and they arrive and they'll play, because it burns off the energy a little bit. It gives them 15-20 minutes. They come early to the sessions now because they can free play first, and then when you get into the session afterwards, we'll do some ball skills work. But then they're happy to do it, because they're it's a breather for them for 10 minutes while they're just getting, and switch to more of a coaching set, and then go into the games-based sessions that we're doing.
Yep.
So a couple of questions then. You mentioned parents there again, which I think is an impact of this. Now, we work with young ones, so that parents are part of the equation for us, because that it's a partnership. It's us, the players, and the parents. With any approach, particularly with the game-based approach then, or an ecological approach, do you think it's important for us as coaches to share as much as we can with that, the parents, so they understand what we're trying to do and stuff? Or do you think that's not as important, as long as we're getting it right with the players, it doesn't really matter too much? And if we had to share with the parents, is that a tricky thing to do?
I do think we should. So the parents are stakeholders as much as the players are. The kids are. And I mean, in general, what I find is, and it might be this is the difference between the sports and the context, I don't know. But in general, what I find is, when they see the kids having a really good fun time, and we're engaging and all that sort of stuff, they come away. The parents are usually, they're picking up on that, and they go, this is a great activity for my child to be involved in, because they're engaged, they're having fun, they're being looked after, they're taken care of, all those sorts of things. And their primary drivers, I think, are met usually, right? So in general, I don't have that much of a challenge. However, I'm very mindful that the way I'm working might not be what is in their mind in terms of their expectation of what a coaching session should look like. And therefore, I do, wherever possible, try and have conversations with them, just casually, or sometimes more formally, or maybe there's a letter that I've created that's on the resources section in the website. There is a letter I send out that says, this is why we coach the way we coach. And there's a little bit of ecological stuff, but nothing like too heavy. I talk a bit about the way hockey's, I'm very fortunate that hockey's got a very ecological lens anyway, so it's aligned, so I can use some of their reference points. And I put out there stuff about, you should expect this from us, and if we don't do that, then you should definitely tell us. But we expect this from you as well. And, there's some behavioral stuff that I expect them to, so for example, if they see something they're really concerned about, they should come and 100% tell me. And I prefer them to do that face-to-face or phone rather than doing the email thing, because that can be quite difficult. And I often think people will say things on email or text that they wouldn't say to you face-to-face or on the phone. So I prefer a proper conversation, because like this conversation is much better. The sort of trouble I get into on Twitter is just because of the format. You know, the dialogue we can have is a far better and more nuanced one. So, that's available to people to get hold of if they want to, FOC. And so I'd say the more you can do that, the better, actually, because then they become advocates. Sometimes they become willing volunteers. They're prepared to step in and referee when you need them to, whatever it might be.
Okay, superb.
Very good point. And Stu, just tell us, we've had a lot of kind of discussions around approaches in training and how we keep things player-centered. And then on the other side of things, you have the match day experience, right? And which is sometimes can be the complete opposite. And we've kind of spoken a bit around these collaborative training matches that Scott's kind of really kind of driving forward, and we can talk about that in a sec. But what is your kind of your experience, and how do you approach kind of match day with your team?
I think competition format is a big problem, or it can be a big problem. So I've definitely experienced this myself. I've spoken about it on several occasions. We recently most of the time in hockey, we play festivals, right? So kids come along, you'll play 4 games there'll be loads of clubs there. We'll play 4 games. Everyone will play a game. Usually everyone gets a medal, or whatever, or no medal, doesn't matter really. I mean, some clubs have decided to only give medals to the kind of team that comes top, which I think defeats the object really, because then you're turning it into something else. But then you've got, recently we had like the county tournament, right? So it gets a bit more serious, right? And I came away from it and reflected on my behaviours. They weren't dreadful, right? I wasn't like screaming and shouting and going berserk and all that sort of stuff, but I definitely wasn't myself. Why wasn't I myself? Why wasn't I like just, keeping it like lively and, and keeping it, we didn't do as well as we should have done. We didn't perform as well as we should have done. I was a bit disappointed, and, I said a few kind of like words at the end, but, I was going through the motions. I was actually quite disappointed. Kids were disappointed. Everyone was disappointed. We all just walked away. But in reality, I'd set out at the start of the day. I said, right, we're going to have the world-class tackle club today, and we're going to vote for who can join at the end of this. Only one person can join. You guys vote on who's going to join the world-class tackle club based on our tackling today, right? Completely forgot about it. Completely forgot. So the experience I'm providing wasn't what it should have been. Why? Because of the format. Now, in the football world, obviously, leagues are everything, right? We have to have a league for, 3-year-olds got to have leagues. I'm being mean, but you know what I mean. And of course, it makes it like super.
Not a million miles away from the truth.
It makes it super competitive, and of course, that changes the way we behave, doesn't it? Even the most well-intentioned of us. My little boy's been playing football this year. He's got a coach who is absolutely phenomenal, right? He's a brilliant guy, right? Because he is holding dear to his philosophy. He set his team up so that everybody would get equal game time. Everybody gets equal game time. They all play in different positions, and he's bought into that. And I have to say, I've had discussions with him to say, I'm not 100% sure in this competition format that is the right thing you should do. I think you should find an alternative format to do that. Because actually I think the players are struggling to adapt to the demands of the competition, and maybe they need a little bit more time just to assimilate into positions a little bit and learn to play with each other and learn about their respective strengths. But he's stuck to his guns, and fair dues to him. He has said, look, that's the way we're going to do things, and we can evaluate at the end of the season. And actually I think it's been really good, right? I think it's just genuinely really good. And I have to say, I look at it myself and think, would that competitive format lend itself to me doing something like that? I'm not sure. So I think competition formats are a real challenge, right? So game day is a big problem. Now, here's the way I'm going to try and tackle this going forward, because I hold my hand up and say it's another work-on area for me. Here's the way I'm going to tackle it going forward. Always, 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 competition is just another learning experience. And we can learn a lot in competition. So it's essentially extension of training. So it should always be themed. Our competition outcome should be themed around training. So what I'm going to do from now on is go, right, we're currently working on ball carry. right? So our focus in this competition is going to be ball carry. There'll be a scoreline. Yeah, that's fine. That's going to be part of it. But actually, the thing we're working on is ball carry, and I am going to give us points every time we do effective ball carries. So now we can extend competition we can extend learning into the competition space, and then reflect on that, come back to our training space, and go like that. Now, that's my challenge. That's my personal challenge based on my reflections from this season, because I don't think I've done that well enough, and that's, I think, where competition can be super valuable for us.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Well, I couldn't agree more, and it is ridiculous how you can go to games and I can talk a good game about player centered, doing the right thing with the players, creating a good learning environment and stuff. But on match days, I feel myself change a little bit, and I think I'm on the good side of the table, but I still feel myself shifting the wrong way a little bit. And I've had games where I've walked away from it disappointed with my own performance about things and the way I've dealt with things, which is ridiculous. And you've got a bunch of under-7 kids trying to beat a bunch of other under-7 kids. The result should not matter, should it? Not to us as adults. It might matter to the players, and that's fine. That's up to them. But as adults, it shouldn't matter to us. I think your point, and that's something that we've tried to do recently, is what we say to the players is, yes, you can want to win the games, absolutely fine. But what a win looks like to me today is this. And it'll be relating to the training practice we've done over the last 2, 3 or 4 weeks. So, how many times can we make recovery runs? How many times can we find our players with a nice pass? How many times can we beat a player with a skill or a trick? And I'll be tying that up. And so the winning for me is this. You guys go and play the way you play and do your thing and worry. But that's what I'm looking at today. And if you can beat your last score or do something amazing, then we've won in that sense. The result may say something different. It may not. But if it does, at least we move the focus away from that. I think the challenge comes, Stu, and it's when you have an approach as a team, if you like, but when you play other teams that don't have that approach and are much more results focused, that it becomes more challenging of your integrity to stick to your principles, because, it's not just you as the coach, it is your players, it is your other parents, it's the club, it's the other opposition as well. And, when you kind of think on an even playing field, if we both did the same thing, it would be a cracking match. But we're trying to do ultimately make it a bit harder for us to get a result maybe, and you guys don't do it, which is absolutely fine. It's your principles, but then it's trying to convince everyone else to still play ball when you're making it harder for your own players to get a result. If that makes sense.
Oh, totally. And that's why I think it's the biggest challenge, because when the kids are getting humped 14-0, it sounds pretty hollow to go, oh, but we worked hard today, boys, and we really worked to pass the ball, and we this, that, and the other. It changes you, doesn't it? And so that's one of the reasons I think competition sometimes is a difficult thing, because it doesn't necessarily foster. Let's face it, right? If if I brought my kids to come play your kids, right, we'd go, right, what game are we going to play today, right? Yeah, we're going to have roll-ins. Of course we are. Yeah, are we all going to give everyone equal game time? Of course we are. If the score's too one-sided, what should we do to change it? We would, wouldn't we? Because that's just a reasonable thing to do. But when you've got a league with rules, all of a sudden that goes out the window, and we no longer are sensible human beings trying to help kids have a good experience. We go, oh, well, no, they're the rules, so that's what we've got to do. And it's just like, oh, really?
Yeah. And I think just a couple of points, quickly. I think firstly, I think the point you made around maybe you felt like you could have been better as a coach after the game. I think if you're reflecting on that, I think that's the right thing to be doing straight away, right? Because next time your behaviour can be better and things like that. But secondly, just Stu, the reason I asked the question is just from my own kind of personal experience. I coach an under-10s team. We play 7-a-side. It's not meant to be competitive, although we are in a league, and you move up and down groups. So obviously your results are recorded, but you don't know how other teams are getting on things and things like that. But it is a competitive environment.
Teams want to win.
Yeah, and I want mine to win. I want my players to go out there and want to win the game. 100%. I say that to them, like the point you made. But I think that I find myself, like in the league games, I find myself a little bit more uptight, a little bit more kind of anxious as I going into the games, thinking that I want them to do well today. And maybe that compromises my approach a little bit, because certainly at the last weekend, our kind of season's finished and we played a friendly, and I just myself so much more relaxed playing this friendly, not even worrying about the result. And even to the point where I agreed with the other coach, and I'm friends with the other coach. But during the game, I was on the pitch coaching, on the pitch. I was talking to some of the players. We've moved to 9-a-side, so we were learning offside. So I was talking to the players on the pitch, and it just made it a much better environment for them, I think, and a much better development kind of opportunity for them as well. And
that's the danger, isn't it? I think the more you focus on the result, the more you can compromise the learning opportunities, right? And that's what I think has been the challenge for grassroots coaches. For me as well, I think I look back at some of the choices I made. When you're making decisions to impact on the result of a game rather than the learning opportunities for the players, I think you've gone wrong. And I know it's hard and I get it, but it shouldn't be hard when you're talking about a bunch of under-year-olds. I mean, it does sound crazy to even say that, but it's the reality of it, and I think we have to do better at trying to change our mindset to realise it doesn't matter so much today if my under-7s but your under-7s. What matters today is that as coaches, we're trying to get the best out of this learning opportunity for our players, and actually giving little Jimmy a chance to go and play left forward or right back or in goal or something is a great opportunity for him to do that. And that's what it may cost us a goal or two or whatever, or may not be so strong up front for whatever reason, but it's the right thing to do because that's going to be the best opportunity to learn for today's game. And it just seems strange that that still is a barrier, and I think it is a barrier, and we can't get that mindset shifted, which is why we look at these CTM things, as ideas, because it's about finding like-minded coaches and agreeing, okay, how can we best work together in the interest of all the players to work on something that's important to both our teams to get better at, without worrying about the result of the game. And it's a shame we have to do that, because you'd hope that especially the junior leagues would allow that to happen in those circumstances, but they definitely don't. In our experience, it's just too competitive, and the result means too much to too many people. Do you find that in hockey, Stu, or is it a bit different in hockey?
Yeah, I mean, not as much. I mean, I can only speak from my own experiences, and like I said, we play festivals, so automatically by its nature it degrades outcome, so everyone's just going to play. It's a group of clubs coming together to play. Now I would prefer it if we use different formats. I'd prefer it if we use different game forms. I would prefer it if some clubs choose to record the scores and put them up, and the kids go along and where did we come and all that, and I would prefer that. But in general, it was okay. We had a bad experience this year. So what happened was we went to a festival. It's mixed, right? I've got under 12s group, right? And it's still mixed at under 12, so boys and girls. And you're supposed to have, like 4 boys, 3 girls. And no word of a lie, just loads of the girls dropped out the night before or on the day, right? And we haven't got that many girls in our group anyway. So we ended up fielding teams. We had 3 teams, right? So I took a lot of teams, right? Probably the most teams there. And we had a lot of boys, and we only had 1 or 2 girls in each team. And as a result, they were stronger, right? So and we did pretty well. And in one of the groups, we won our league. And afterwards, one of the teams who'd come second to when they did the announcement, and they gave out the medals, as you do, and there was a presentation, and one of the other teams said, "Well, they only played a load of boys." And it was very publicly done. And then the guy who was the organizer, "Well, yes, you really ought to. Next year, you're probably going to have to change." Da, 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 da. And I was a little bit like, well, firstly, don't do that in front of the kids. That's unnecessary. Let's have a conversation like adults out. Don't do it publicly because it's not their fault, right? Secondly, from the outset, we said, look, this is the situation. Do you want us to go home and a load of kids don't get an experience, or what do you want us to do? And all of that came about because they decided to have a winner and a league and some medals. Yeah. If it had been, we're going to rock up and play, and we're not going to record the scores, and the kids get a good experience, and yes, there will be some score lines, and if you really care about them, by all means, write them down on your phone and be happy about that. But in reality, we're just playing some games. None of that would have happened. And so there's that part of me that thinks that shifted.
But this is the adult mindset, isn't it? Because what you'd hope the coach think, what a great challenge for us playing against you guys today. It's a tough team. Maybe I've got a team, and it's not that I'm not saying the boys are better than the girls, but it's different. It's a different challenge for the girls. So a different challenge today, playing against a team with more boys in it. It'd be good for you. You're going to get a lot of learning out of that. Forget about the result. Just go and play and learn and challenge and see how you can compete. And that's worth more than a medal is surely anyway, And it's just when adults shift the focus away from the learning, to a £2 medal that you can go and buy online for. It just seems crazy, but it is part of it. Stuart, a couple of questions. I know we're a bit of push for time, and I know you've got loads of things on, but a couple more questions, if that's okay. Mm-hmm. One is, with your podcast, obviously we focus on football, and I think there's a reason for that, in the sense that with knowledge only goes so far. But for you, how important do you think it is that even as just football coaches or any sport, we look at other sports to develop ourselves as well? So that's one question. Part of that is, for us as football coaches, where do you think we should look to develop our skills outside of football itself? And I think hockey is a good example, and maybe basketball too. But so do you think it's important to look at other sports? And if so, which sports could we look at more to help us develop our coaching, would you suggest?
Well, I think I've been very fortunate that in my career, as in my day job career, I've been very fortunate to be able to be exposed to a lot of different sports. I've worked in coach development. I spent some time working for UK Coaching. I was their talent performance lead, and it meant I worked with 35 different sports, and quite intensively with 6 or 7 Olympic sports. So I was working with badminton, canoeing, rowing. And one of the things that was really fascinating about working with all those sports is the amount I could learn about what they did. There was quite a lot of things I learned, like, why'd you do that? That's weird. But there was a lot of stuff I learned that was like, oh, that's really interesting what they do there. I'm stealing that. Oh, I like that. I'm stealing that. And actually, I think we can become a little bit too myopic sometimes and just focus in our own little world. One of the things I've found with doing the podcast is, there's quite a lot of football on there, but there's also quite a bit of rugby. There's a bit of, quite a few hockey people. I'd like to get a lot more individual sports on if I can. But what I'm finding is that, we've had volleyball, we've had, movement specialists in NFL, we've had all these sorts of different people. And one of the things I find is there's so much to be gained from the approaches and the way people are thinking about their sport and the approach they're taking. And, there's always something to be learned. Like, I've mentioned a couple of times, guy who's been on the podcast quite a few times, Kendall McQuaid, golf coach. Like, the guy's just a skill acquisition genius. The way he thinks about helping people learn, I just learned so much from him. To give me a golf club, right? A golf club with a hammer on the end of it, right? Why? Well, he's saying to me, can you drive a nail into the wall? Yes. And then how do I hold it to do that? Oh, I hold it like that. So I'd automatically change my stance and my grip in order to drive this nail into a wall in order to generate maximum power. So I take that away. And if I'm helping somebody to learn about hitting a hockey ball, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm not going to get a hammer on the end of a hockey stick. I haven't quite got his mean. But I'm going to use the metaphor of, imagine this was a hammer, imagine that was a nail. How would you drive it into the wall? And I can help them come around a different idea of a particular movement approach. Obviously, later in the day, don't do it straight away, But so that what I'm saying is there is always so much to be gleaned from seeing other people in their environments doing what they do.
Yeah, super. I think when I see your podcast get released and I look at the episode titles, it's often the ones that I feel like I'll listen to it, but it won't be as relevant to me because of coaching football, but I'll give it a go, that I get the most little golden nuggets out of, because it's things I've not even thought about before around different things. And it's often around different ways in which you can approach setting up a session or looking at the environment or how you might communicate to players. And it's something completely away from football specifically, but a lot of relevance, and I pinch those ideas. So thanks for that. You had a good question about the age and stage of players.
Yeah. So I think that Scott and I are very much focused on the foundation phase at the moment in our kind of coaching careers, for want of a better phrase. How do you think about coaching as you go through the different kind of ages? If I think about it from a footballing standpoint, you've got the kind of foundation phase, then you go into youth development phase. I think from under 12s onwards. Would you start to change your kind of coaching approach when you get to that kind of later age groups? Obviously, the competition does get more serious because it's competitive football, even at under 12s. Unfortunately, it's competitive football. Would you change your approach, or would you stick to what you've got and what you do?
So, I think one of the problems with staged development I've got to be careful here because I don't want to criticise an entire sport necessarily. But I think this is a bit of a legacy of long-term athlete development models, and I was a big advocate of them. Wrote a framework, long-term athlete development framework for golf that still exists today, I think. And one of the things I'm slightly concerned about is it assumes that everybody develops at the same speed, which we know doesn't happen. And it also assumes that, so let's take it from the perspective of just skill development. That doesn't happen. Let's take it from the perspective of maturation. That doesn't happen. Now, we know there are averages, and we can work on those averages, and we can probably go plus or minus a couple of years. There's probably, we're all going to be, but it kind of, I think it's also kind of a bit of a dangerous message that by this stage, players should. By this stage, players should. And I've worked with a couple of academies recently, and they've really genuinely begun to question this because they feel under pressure that they teach to the curriculum in order to get the players to be able to perform so that they go on to the next stage, Because if the players aren't meeting those, kind of core demands, then they're under pressure or to, move them out and bring some other ones in. Now, the problem is these are human beings, and human development's complex. And it's not simple and ordered. And so I find them bit difficult, and I think we need to maybe begin to tweak the way we look at them and look at them as guides. They're a guide, right? Yeah. And I just think I wish we were more flexible as well. I've never met a sport yet that's done this, right? But you know as well as I do, right, that in your under 10s group, you're going to have kids who are biologically 12 and kids who are biologically 8. But they've got to compete together. Now, okay, there's some value to that, but why couldn't we have a moment in the season whereby, for example, for say 4 weeks, they just compete with kids who are approximately the same biological age? And so, Big Yusuf can play with kids like Big Yusuf, and little Barney can play with kids like little Barney, and little Gemma can play with kids like little Gemma. Why can't we do that? And the reason we can't do that is because we've got formal competition structures, we've got formal stage development pathways, and we match the competition structure against those development pathways. All well-meaning stuff. It's time for us. We have it within our capabilities. We have technology, and if we don't want to use the technology, we've actually got common sense approaches that we could adopt tomorrow if we wanted to. And I think the challenge for the entire youth sport community, and it's a challenge for all governing bodies, is we've been doing it this way for years and years and years. It's very linear. How can we now explore the idea of a non-linear approach to player development that will provide more meaningful player development solutions? And it will help us develop better players. I'm certain of it. And if the worst came to the worst, it would help us retain more players in sport and physical activity. And that's a decent outcome in itself.
Do you see it happening, Stu? Being optimistic is...
No. Well, do you know what? No.
Is it just because we're too entrenched in one way of... It's just too much history going down this path. It's like turning an oil tank around. It's too much effort, or...
Yeah, well, look, I know people who have done this, right? They have changed competition structures in sports. I know people who've done it. A guy called Gary Townsend, more or less in rugby, single-handedly changed the competition structure in rugby. It could still be better, even by his own admission, but he did a brilliant job, and it's a lot better than it was. Nick Levette, who's been on a podcast, more or less, not single-handedly, but with a lot of support from other intrepid people, but a lot of it was him out there on the roads, convincing people, doing the consultation. Change in sport is really, really, really difficult. Having said that, I think there is a genuine will, and there is a desire and a hunger. And I actually think I think we've got to understand some of the constraints that governing bodies tend to operate within in terms of decision making. So actually, I think it needs to be a grassroots movement, which is why the stuff you guys are doing with the podcasts, and also the way you're operating yourself and the messages that you're sending out, the stuff that Debbie over there in Salisbury Rovers is doing. There's a growing community out there that are beginning to say, actually, I think we can do this better. And actually, I believe that's going to be the future, is this grassroots movement beginning to put pressure back up to the governing bodies to say, we don't want to do it this way anymore. And I think that's potentially the way it's going to happen.
Yeah, no pressure, Mark.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I think there's some great points there. Really, really good points. I think the other challenge here is also the parents getting them on board that their son or their daughter is actually now training with or playing with a year younger. And I know this kind of firsthand. I was talking to a parent, not in the team that I coach. His son's in a different team. He was playing at a paid academy, a well-known paid academy, and his son was training with the year below or the 2 years group below, whilst his friends were playing in the right age group. And he was kind of ranting and raving at me. Why I wasn't making decisions. I was just kind of listening to him. But he was ranting about my son's playing a year below. All his friends are playing a year above. This isn't right. And I just kind of put it back and just asked him the kind of questions, the kind of points that you've made here, Stu. I could see he started to think it through, but he definitely wasn't on board with it, and he definitely wasn't. I think there's a big education to go down that road, which I think is the right thing to do. There's a big education around the parents as well. Yeah.
Stu, final question, if that's okay. Then, just really, what your plans and your hopes for the podcast moving forward. I've said already that we get loads out of it, and we listen to every episode and we take it all on board. But what's your hopes with it moving forward? Have you got a plan with it, or is it like you're coaching? It's very ecological. You roll with it and see where it lands, or is there a greater cause?
Yeah, no, I genuinely, I think you hit the nail on the head. I haven't really got a big plan with it. I just want to continue having great conversations. I just hope that people still keep getting what they get out of it. Honestly, it still surprises me that people like listening to me rambling on with somebody. But I mean, the other day I came back from doing a workshop, and there was a guy who's in the car park. He's going and like he had the podcast on in the car as he's driving away. He goes, "Yeah, you're going to keep me company on the way home now." I'm like, "Whoa, that's weird."
That's when you know you've made it. It's like you hear your own song on the radio. That's it. You're done now. Look.
So to be honest, yeah, I'm just loving the journey. I really am loving the journey. I can't say it's not without its challenges. Putting a podcast out. I mean, I missed the first week last week because I was away on holiday and I just couldn't get it done. And so, so like scheduling it and getting it produced and put out is a challenge. Work sometimes is there, and when work gets big, who are the people who sacrifice family and all that? So the balancing act is always a challenge, but I love having the conversations. I want to continue to find people who are out there who are doing interesting and amazing things. I think there's loads more conversations to have. And look, let's see where it goes. It's an adventure in conversation. I just do different things. We've had the panel this time, a few times this year. So just trying some new experiments and new ideas as we go along, and then see what the future holds. Yeah, very much an emergent property, this podcast, very much so.
Brilliant, Stu. Well, thank you so much. I mean, please do keep them coming. We genuinely, we're massive fans. We love it. It's been an honour to have you on the early start of our little podcast and things, and we're getting a bit of traction. But more important than anything else, Stu, what I can say to you, if it's all right, is just what you've produced on the episodes we've listened to, without doubt, has helped me become a better coach. I've still got a long way to go, but I'm better. But more importantly, categorically, it has enabled the players that I've coached to have a better learning experience and enjoy their learning more because of the stuff that I've heard from you in the shows. So I'm very, really grateful for what you've done. And, the boys are too young to know it themselves, but I will fess up one day that half the ideas I've got, if not more than half, are coming from you and the people that you get on the show.
Well, look,
I'm sure Mark will say the same.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful discussion. And just from what we've spoken about today, I'm stealing the world-class tackling club, by the way. I think that was one of your match day challenges. I'm going to tweak it a little bit, but I'm going to steal that. I think it's fantastic.
Well, I got that from a guy called James Bateman for a podcast series that I'm going to produce for England Hockey, specifically for them. And he came out. He had the world-class tackle back club, right? Jump back club, right? And I stole that from him. So I got to give him credit, and he probably stole it from some real thieves. But listen,
that's the art of coaching, right?
Hearing what you said about the fact that the podcast has helped, I mean, that's what it's for. That's why I do it. And so, I can't get any greater satisfaction than hearing you say that. And, if ever there was in the dark days where I'm thinking, at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock at night when I'm busy editing, and I'm thinking, what the hell, I'll think of that. And that'll be a great motivator.
Yeah. And you can apologise to the wife and say it's Scott and Mark's fault. Well, thank you so much. I think we're putting this out on our podcast. So what, should I do the finish now and just tell the listeners where we're at and stuff? Is that okay?
Go right ahead.
If they want to get hold of us. So we've had again some really great tweets and some emails again this week. No chance to go through them today, but we will on the next episode, I promise you. Massive thanks to Stu and the Talent Equation podcast. I'm sure you listened to it already. If you don't, you must listen to it because every episode has got some, has got gems in it to pick out, and it makes a massive difference to the way you look at coaching and what you might do moving forward. If you do want to reach us, we can be found on Twitter at SoccerCoachCast, or you can email us info@thesoccercoachingpodcast.com. Anything you want to add, Mark, to the end there?
No, just once again, thank you very much, Stu. It's been a fantastic discussion.
Thanks, Stu.
Really appreciate it.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks very much.
Cheers, guys.